Last month, I tasked my subscribers with designing their own superhero and supervillain, as I was going to take the hero from one person and fuse it with the villain from another. And you all sent in some really cool designs and stories. So let's see what they would look like if they were combined. Let's create some chaos! Hailing from a long line of noble vampires, Prince Jason Dracul was both highly regarded and highly criticized for his actions. As a son of the Dracul family, any action that could be seen as contradictory towards his family mission was ridiculed with the utmost scrutiny. Jason's family had dedicated themselves to forging peaceful relations between humans and monsters, an objective that included creating schools to help both monsters and humans be less violent and hateful towards each other. The Dracul's family goal was quite controversial, with many believing it to be unachievable and others simply disagreeing with it. As such, people were constantly making a fuss over every action they made and every policy they passed. No member was exempt from the public's leering eye, especially Jason. Jason was a kind soul and fully believed that peace between monsters and humans was achievable. However, he didn't want to be part of the process, much preferring to live a normal life away from the public's perception. As such, the people under the rule of the Draculs rarely said anything regarding Jason, until the day that he fell ill. Around the age of 2000, Jason fell deathly ill with an unknown disease that not even the best doctors could diagnose. Desperate to save her son, Jason's mother ventured out under the veil of night to try and find anything that could help Jason, even if just temporarily. As fortune would have it, she came across an old saleswoman tugging her cart through the dark. She explained her family's situation to her, and the old woman immediately began rummaging through her cart until she pulled out a glowing green jewel. Jason's mom grabbed the jewel and ran off without even so much as a thank you. When she returned to the Dracul Manor, she put the jewel around her sick son's neck. Almost instantaneously, he was back to full health. Whatever the old saleswoman had provided, it worked miracles. Jason continued life as he had before he fell ill for the next few days. However, he awoke one night in horrible pain. The jewel was glowing a sickly green and his skin burned from where it made contact with him. He screamed trying to take it off, but it wouldn't move. He thrashed around pulling at the gem, when all of a sudden, everything went black. Jason found himself floating in an empty space. The world around him began to fade into existence as he woke up again. Only this time, he didn't feel like he was in control. His body moved seemingly on its own as his consciousness only watched from the sidelines. He saw in horror as his body left his room, approached one of the doctors that was taking care of him, and skewered him with the sword that his family had given him. The jewel that Jason's mother had received from the old saleswoman turned out to be a cursed artifact from a witch, who was heavily opposed to the Dracul's family goal of achieving peace. She had poisoned Jason on one of his few trips outside of the manor, and then disguised herself as the saleswoman to give his mother the cure. In reality, the jewel contained the demon Leviathan, and when Jason was asleep, Leviathan could possess him. Furthermore, the demon could also transform any part of Jason's body into any reptile it so chose. Jason's consciousness fruitlessly tried to stop the demon as Leviathan took his body around town, causing all sorts of chaos. The public watched in horror as they saw what they thought to be Prince Jason Dracul transform into a giant snake and kill dozens of humans and monsters alike. Jason had to find a way to get his body back, or, at the very least, alert his family, for everything they had done to work towards peaceful relations went up in smoke. Many times, a constant onslaught of hardships and tragedies could make a person lose their way. One bad day is all it takes to turn even the sweetest person into a cold-hearted shell of their former self. Although, in rare cases, one will fight through the adversity and continue to live a way that they believe is true to themselves. Such was the case with Dorian Leo Brawl. In a world where many people had superpowers, Dorian's were far from flashy. The boy had slightly above average stamina, around 3 to 4%, at a young age, which made him very effective at running, though it didn't allow for much else. As a young boy, Dorian lost his mother when a superhero chase went awry, and the elemental hero Flare hit her car with a fireball. After that, Dorian's father Jonathan raised the boy on his own, while also trying to manage a small bookstore that he owned. Young Dorian would help his father around the store, and the appreciation he received from the work blossomed into a desire to help, protect, and provide for people. Even though the bookstore wasn't super popular, and despite their loss, Dorian and Jonathan were happy. Unfortunately, this wouldn't last long, as about 2 years after his mother passed away, Jonathan's bookstore was raided by a group of heroes. They said they were tipped off by an anonymous source, who claimed that a notorious supervillain was hiding out at this location. The heroes turned the bookstore inside out looking for the supervillain, or any clues of their being there, but couldn't find anything. They were about to leave when the anonymous source contacted them and told them that the supervillain was actually Jonathan himself. They followed the source's instructions and found plans for a powerful explosive hidden inside the store's cash register. Jonathan was arrested on the spot and taken to a maximum security prison to live out the rest of his days, leaving Dorian alone. Dorian roamed the streets by himself. He had now lost both of his parents at the hands of heroes. He didn't know whether his dad really was a supervillain or not, but he believed he deserved a second chance. He sat alone in an alleyway with his back against a rough brick wall as the rain drenched him from head to toe. As he cried to himself, he noticed a faint glow coming from his hands. He stuck them out and a small ray of light had burst from them. The grief and the emotional stress of not knowing where to go next had caused more powers to develop within him. Now, alongside his increased stamina, Dorian was able to access 3 randomly generated abilities at any time. With enough concentration, he'd be able to choose one specific ability, but the other 2 would always be randomized. In order to become more familiar with his powers, and to make some money, Dorian began competing in underground fighting rings and quickly became a fan favorite. While fighting in these competitions, Dorian came across a lot of people who lived less than admirable lives, but ones who were also trying to turn over a new leaf. That's when Dorian came up with an idea. He created a group known as the Family of Fight, which was dedicated to giving people second chances. Whenever anyone from the Family of Fight would get into trouble, Dorian would personally apologize to the authorities and hold the offending party accountable, but he would not allow them to be thrown into jail like his father. They were his family, and he made it his job to protect all of them and give them a shot at redemption. Unfortunately, there was a problem. As the Family of Fight grew bigger, so did the word about it. Every so often, heroes would storm their base of operations and try to arrest a bunch of members. A higher-up from one of the superhero agencies, named Dr. Funnybone, would tip off the heroes to where they could find the family, and use his influence to convince the public that the Family of Fight were a dangerous group of criminals. But no matter what happened, or what obstacles stood in his way, Dorian Leo Brawl stood true to himself, and defended his new found family. Vanessa Creed had a brilliant young mind. She was fascinated by a variety of subjects and eager to learn more about them. What she was the most keen on learning, though, was where she came from. Vanessa spent most of her childhood growing up in foster care. She would spend a lot of her spare time reading books about different subjects. During the few times she would hang around the other kids, she would sometimes hear them mention their lives outside of the orphanage. Unfortunately, whenever she would ask the foster caretakers where she came from, they would claim they didn't know anything. She wished learning about her past was as easy as picking up a book and reading about it. While in foster care, she met Daniel, a kind young boy that introduced Vanessa to Christianity. Vanessa took the ideals of the religion to heart and strived to use her talents to help the world. Eventually, she was adopted into a loving home, with a family that supported her all throughout medical school. As soon as she graduated, Vanessa found herself a job in the medical field, where she planned on dedicating her life to finding a cure for cancer. She worked tirelessly, day in and day out, researching different cells and techniques that could possibly further her research. One night, while she was working particularly late, one of the test tubes containing chemicals was struck by electricity, causing it, and several other chemicals in the vicinity, encode the lab in a mixture of them. Vanessa braced herself, expecting to be coated by the chemicals, but they never hit her. She cautiously peeked her head out from her arm and saw the chemicals suspended in midair. She took the time to fully look at it and realized that the chemicals were frozen. She put her hand down, and as soon as she did, the chemicals continued moving again. She instinctively threw up her hand, and once again, the chemicals stopped moving. Vanessa walked out of the room and finally dropped her hand while looking through the window on the door. Immediately, all the chemicals finished their trajectory and splashed all over the walls. She was about to go back into her lab and clean up when she heard a deep voice from behind her. She whipped around and saw a man standing next to her. The man introduced himself as Father Time. He explained that Vanessa was his sixth offspring, and he was waiting for the day when her powers manifested. He had met with her twin brother, whose power had manifested a month earlier. He apologized for keeping her in the dark for so long and not being able to give her answers. Vanessa took the news surprisingly well. She thanked her father and asked if it was possible for the three of them to meet up. About a week later, Vanessa, her twin brother, and her father all sat together at a cafe and discussed the extent of their powers. Apparently, as twins, both Vanessa and her brother were able to travel backwards and forwards through time. However, only Vanessa was able to alter the age of a person, while her brother could enter various timelines. They had been talking for a while when suddenly the skies turned black. Fiery rain began crashing down around them as one struck Father Time in the chest, killing him instantly. Both Vanessa and her brother screamed as a figure descended upon them from the sky. They introduced themselves as the Destroyer, Master of Illusions and Conqueror of all. They demanded that Vanessa and her brother join them or be killed like their father. Without hesitation, Vanessa's brother moved to stand beside the Destroyer. Vanessa, however, began to pray for guidance. When she opened her eyes, she could see a flicker of her father still sitting at the table, looking at her in confusion. Something inside her told her that what she and her brother were experiencing was one of the Destroyer's illusions. She refused the Destroyer's offer, shut her eyes, and found herself back in the real world, exactly how she left it. Only her twin brother wasn't there. Now, Vanessa had a new goal: to use her time powers to defeat the Destroyer and get her brother back. With unlimited money and flexible morals, the scientific advancements that a group can make are remarkable. However, it is only in the way said advancements end up ultimately being used that can greatly determine the way others view the use of resources. Sean Florence was one of the people who were against the research being conducted by the Ragnarok division, mainly because he was one of the few who ended up being part of their experiments. Sean had lost his family when he was young and spent most of his youth in an orphanage. As time went by, Sean noticed that other children and even staff members from the orphanage were going missing. It wasn't long before he himself was the subject of the disappearances. He found himself in a laboratory full of blinding lights, where people in white lab coats and face masks poked and prodded him and injected him with an unknown substance. He didn't know how long they kept him there for, but eventually, he found himself back in the orphanage. Once he was back, Sean began noticing a change in the way the children and even the orphanage staff treated him. They were more openly hostile towards him, and even forced him to stay outside for extended periods of time. One day he transformed into a monstrous abomination. Sean and the other children from the orphanage were being abducted by the Ragnarok division and experimented on. The division had not only found evidence of ancient elemental avatars that existed since before the dawn of time, but learned how to extrapolate pieces of their souls and break them down into serums. They injected each kid with a different serum from one of the 6 elemental avatars in an effort to create the first demigod. Sean had been the first test subject to survive the initial injection. The Ragnarok division had returned him to the orphanage shortly after to keep an eye on him, documenting any changes or side effects that may arise from the serum. It took a few days for the serum to fully take effect and transform Sean into a massive icy kaiju. While in his kaiju form, Sean had extraordinary strength, allowing him to lift objects well over 25 times his own weight. He could also recover from injuries much faster, even regrowing body parts, and manipulate ice, as well as transform his arms into a variety of icy weapons and tools. Having learned what the Ragnarok division had done to him and the other children, Sean set out on a mission to take revenge on the scientist that turned him into a monster. However, it wouldn't be as easy as he thought. Sean would soon find himself coming face to face with multiple superpowered guardians that the Ragnarok division employed, including a set of sisters that the Ragnarok division experimented on long before he was. They were part of a different operation than Sean, and both had the ability to control electricity. His size and strength gave him the advantage when fighting one of them, but when they were teamed up, there were many close calls. Sean vowed that no matter what happened, no matter how long it took, he would take down the Ragnarok division and avenge the many who died, all for the sake of their scientific advancements. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I love fusion art. It's by far my favorite type of topic to do on this channel. I just absolutely love combining designs together. It's so fun. Thank you everybody who submitted. I know this one was a bit of extra work having designed a whole nother character, but you all did a really good job. And a special thank you and congratulations as always to the people who were picked. Ark, Galahound19, probably not a felon, Apple Flavors, The Great Elder, Alden Throckmorton, Old Willow 4, and Ven. And next up is the August 2024 Recreations prompt. I want all of you to design your own dragon or fantasy beast. We'll be diving into a, air quotes, new world in our next recreations, so I'm excited to see what you all come up with. Please provide one full body and one close-up headshot, so 2 drawings, and all other details are on the screen, including where to submit and deadline. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you want to see more content like this, then I highly recommend the Voice Actor Fusion playlist right here, or some other recreations from the past. My name is Kingpin Creations, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.